Hi everyone, I'm delighted to have Nick Clarke with us today. Nick was Repton Prep and Director of Sport at Kent College for many years, very experienced Director of Sport. Nick's still doing a lot of coaching, hockey and mentoring other coaches, and he's currently doing a PhD in coach development in the women's football game. So we'll be able to call him Dr. Nick so soon. So Nick, very many thanks for joining us, and we were going to talk about coach development. So maybe you could sort of share your experience as a director of sport and how you think we can develop coach development in our own schools.
Yeah, it probably triggered, like coaches, probably influenced by their background and beginnings and who they're coached by. So I think my interest stems from what I experienced as director of sport at Kent College, in that we had a lot of external coaches. So my dilemma was often, how do we ensure we've got the quality of coaching? Because as you know, director of sport, it's always very busy. You're running around, you're doing your own coaching, but you're not quite always aware of what's going on the other pitches. And I think largely it can be excellent, but also, as people will be aware, it can present some challenges. So I've always been interested in how, as a department and as a school, we can ensure excellent coaching.
And I think, particularly we were discussing earlier with, the financial pressures on independent schools at the minute. If we can grow our own, if we can develop our own coaches as directors of sports or heads of sport, that's got to be beneficial to us. So, in your experience, Nick, how have you been able to develop maybe external coaches, coaches within your, sports department and academic staff?
Obviously, there's a mixture there. I think the PE staff, they're there full time, they're there all the time. So I think that's probably more traditional and making sure they're on board with what our values are and trying to encourage CPD in developing their skills, whether they're a new teacher, whether they're an experienced one. Peer group work has been excellent working together, which I think we did a lot at Kent College. Was always very good. Um, Academic staff probably has been a little bit harder because at Kent College we had a situation in which we only had external coaches plus the PE department. But on the external coaches, that was probably we drew our coaches from universities, local sports clubs, and professional club coaches. And in our area, we often had elite players from different sports who would come in and coach as well, and all of those had their benefits and also challenges. I don't know whether you want me to go through some of those.
Yeah,
So
definitely. I mean, if
just
you
to go through the different types of people you can.
Yeah, I think particularly for directors of sport, some advice on how you'll use your experience to develop those, particularly external coaches, so we're all on the same page, if you like.
Yeah, so the external coaches, I think as a criticism of myself, I probably thought it would just work. And I think after a year or two, I thought we need to be much more coordinated. So after a year or 2 years of floundering in just feeling happy I've got a program sorted, I think I then started looking right what is actually being delivered on the ground. So we started to have pre-term meetings to make sure that external coaches were aligned with what we were looking for in terms of the school values and uh, where they would be most involved. Would it be at kind of the, for want of a better term, the performance end? Was it the kind of recreational end, participation end? And just trying to fit the right people to the right roles, which wasn't always possible
Mm.
in restricted staffing, but you would try and do your best that way. So that was one way. Another way was trying to bring in a mentor for
Mm.
some of the coaches. So I could do some of that, but also I think we had about 35 external coaches in total. Um, and I say, as you know, director of sport roles are very different. Some people might be teaching 4 periods a week. I know I was on about 32 with A level and GCSE. So sometimes the time that I could devote to it was probably not what I would love to have done it, but I couldn't do it. So we did bring mentor in to help full time to support the full time staff in their coaching and their development, and also the external coaches as well to try and see where they were at really. So as I say, we probably had some would come from the local university, be very keen. Some would be elite players at the local sports club. And as I say, they would all be very, very different. All be very different, which I can go into detail if you want a bit more.
I think two of the things that you've said there really
Go first.
resonate. I think, you've mentioned values a lot, and I think it is very important for external coaches, isn't it, that they buy into the school's values. And secondly, they're the mentoring. I mean, it's a two-way process. If you've got younger members of staff on your team or
Yes.
those who have aspirations to be a director of sport or a head of sport, mentoring somebody else can be a really valuable experience for them as well, can't it?
Yes, definitely. And I think, yeah, just thinking of my experiences now is one of the people who came in to be a part-time PE teacher is now the director of sport there. So it has kind of served as an apprenticeship in many ways.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of some of the external coaches. I think some of them, probably the more inexperienced ones, are probably coming from a very low bar of school experience.
Mm.
And I think that probably also applies to elite players who have the tremendous knowledge,
Yeah.
but coming into a school environment, they might suddenly be exposed to maybe taking a first team, maybe taking an A team, but also in a school, as you know, you're not always able to coach exactly who you want. So sometimes the elite coaches,
Yeah.
the players sometimes have to learn to adapt to taking a different group, and it's those personal skills that probably are very very important in a school. And I think, as you know, we can bring big players in. They have a big name. They're introduced. They've played this game and that game, but within 2 weeks they're just Sir.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think it's developing those skills as well, that they're able to coach different people, different pupils. So I think that's really important as well. Um, yeah, and external coaches, you've got them in for different reasons, haven't they? Some might be just finding a bit of pocket money from university, and this is a good opportunity for them to earn a little bit. So it's then trying to get them to buy into the values and buy into the enthusiasm and the passion that school coaching matters, I think.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Nick. I think the personal skills, those players that are able to relate to the pupils, whether that's someone who's learning to play a game for the
Yeah.
first time, and they want to help, they want to make
Mm.
it, but also, as you say, they've got the skills that they can help players at the performance end as well. Just before we start as well, Nick, we were talking about academic staff, and obviously at Kent College, you intimated there that you weren't able to use your academic staff, but for a lot of directors of sport, using academic staff is really, really important. And we were saying that it's easy sometimes to say that academic staff, don't are lazy, don't get involved. And I think it's up to us as directors of sport and as heads of sport to get them involved and give them confidence and give them those skills. So, how would you recommend directors of sport upskill those academic staff who are very keen to get involved, but as I say, just need a few ideas and a bit more confidence?
Yeah, I'll come to that in a second, but I think it's interesting in that I think the sport can be a great unifying factor within the staff room.
Yeah,
So I remember at a previous school in the north of England, which I kind of not first started teaching, probably my second role, and the Monday morning period from kind of 8 o'clock to 20 past 8, where everyone could come in for a quick coffee before tutor period, form period, and they would just talk about what had happened at the weekend.
yeah,
And That probably always also raises, external coaches. You probably lose a bit of that. You
Yeah.
lose a bit of that unification and the connection between the PE department, the sports department, who have been busy all Saturday. And I think the academic staff being on those games periods is really crucial for that connection. In terms of how to support them, I think that's part of it. That connection is important, and it's making them feel fully involved, and they're not just a kind of an addition.
Yeah.
PE teachers are going to be full time on the sport, and it's important that they are involved in that and feel part of it.
No, I would agree. I think, if we can give them some form of responsibility, whether that's doing the warm up or looking after this particular skill or those pupils, and also making sure that before they arrive, they know the plan of the lesson. They know what they're going to do. Because, as I said, some of the worst
Yes.
team
Yeah.
teaching I've seen is when an academic member of staff turns up 10 minutes late. You probably can't blame them for being 10 minutes late because they're bored most weeks and not used.
Yeah.
Whereas the academic staff I've seen that have been the most successful are the ones that are involved and are, used in whichever shape or form you want as when you're team teaching. But it is important that we give them the confidence. And as you said there, Nick, let's build those relationships with those academic staff and make them realize how important they are to our program.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting relationship, isn't it? I think you hinted at a few things there. Is that it's probably you might look at it and go, it's your responsibility
Yeah.
to be on time and the rest of it. But they might have a situation, obviously in public schools, you might be in the boarding, they might be having an issue to deal with, and it's just having that awareness, isn't it? Where probably you're responsible for taking the lead,
Yeah, definitely.
and it's just getting that collaboration, isn't it, to
Yeah.
to make sure it works well, because often some of the academic teachers, there's an element of it's voluntary for them to do that. It's a massive commitment on top of their full time academic
Yeah.
teaching, which is their priority. So it's important that when they come, they enjoy it, but also they have some responsibility as well.
Yeah. And the easier we can make it for them, let's face it, the better it is. As you say, you've got to involve them. You've got to make sure they feel important. But, if you've planned the work, if you've got the kit out, it does make life easier. Nick, that's been really interesting there. If you were going to leave directors of sport with any advice about coach education, what would it be to finish?
I would probably think about devising a system of meeting with each coach to see how they want to develop their coaching, and make sure it's a two-way process, that they're developing the coaching rather than necessarily just being told, right, you're on this year seven lesson. I think it's got to be, can we find coaches within your program that they are going to develop, and they're responsible for that as well.
Yeah.
So I think my work with the FA on the PhD, the FA coach developers like working with intentional coaches,
Yeah.
and I really love that term. And if we're going to get our kind of teaching staff, our external coaches, who are only in a few hours a week, and they can be intentional coaches, I think that's a great plus, really.
I think that's a brilliant bit of advice for any director of sport, isn't it? If you can spend time with the people you employ, helping them to, grow, it's gold dust. So that's a great bit of advice.
Mm.
Nick, thanks for your time this morning and good luck with your PhD and your hockey coaching for the rest of this year.
Yeah.